Welcome back, everyone, to the long awaited final video of my World Junior Series, just 2 months off schedule. I first have to say that I apologize for disappearing for so long. Sometimes just life gets in the way. Also, want to thank you all for the incredible support. Even when I was absent, I still received many comments asking where this video was. And I really appreciate that you enjoyed the series and were anxious to see more. For those of you who have watched the previous videos and understand the system, you can skip ahead to the start of the analysis with the timestamp in the description. For those who are new or want a refresher, let's get started with the breakdown of how this video works. Firstly, goalies are given two different ratings on a 0 to 12 point scale. Each number corresponds to a level of play from low end junior up to NHL franchise goalie. There are examples here shown. Each goalie is given a current ability rating, which I determine based on the technique and ability observed, as well as performance at the level they play at with their respective clubs. They are also given a potential rating where I take the same things into account, try to assess what I think their optimistic potential could be. Lastly, I have ranked all 18 goalies at the World Juniors based on the results, teams they played, team defense, and abilities observed solely at the tournament. All right, let's get into what you came here to see. Carter George was Team Canada's starter at the World Juniors this year, and, full disclosure, he's one of my favorite goalies currently. George heard his name called at the tail end of the second round from this past year's draft by the Los Angeles Kings. Becoming the starter for Team Canada this year was actually a pleasant surprise. I expected one of Carson Bjarnason or Scott Ratzlaff, Canada's third string last season, to start, as they are as seniors. Despite Canada's very disappointing run, George was not the reason why, and he actually proved that he was the right choice to be at the helm. He played only 4 games, but posted a very impressive 936 save percentage in that span. I thought George played well in all of his games, even though he led in 7 goals in the last two. But I actually don't really think they were on him. They were a combination of flukes, cross ice rush passes, slot passes, and uncontested dangerous shots. He did get beaten pretty cleanly 3 times on the blocker side from direct shots, which is kind of interesting, and all of which came from the Americans. Shooting particularly to the blocker side, just over the pad, but underneath the hand, away from the body, is extremely dangerous. There's a real argument to be made that it might actually be the most lethal direct shot and just kind of nearly unsavable if you're able to sneak it in just inside the post. It's very difficult to manipulate the blocker downwards that quickly with a stick in your hand. I have an untested working theory that bigger goalies likely have an advantage with such shots, given their natural longer wingspan. Yet, they do have to be very precise because if they overextend, they will create an even bigger hole. A smaller goalie or someone with shorter arms at the basic level might struggle with those shots, as they'll be required to make more pronounced movements. However, if they're able to make such movements consistently, it doesn't really make a difference between a small or big goalie in this aspect. What I'm trying to say is, I do not fault George, nor am I actually concerned. Transitioning to George's strengths, we get to talk about the fun stuff. George plays in what I believe to be the so called right way. Instead of relying upon raw, innate athleticism and explosiveness, he uses elite positioning, high level anticipation, intelligent routes, and fantastic footwork that takes a true craftsman and tons of hard work to master. He plays a similar game to that of Connor Hellebuck or Henrik Lundqvist, arguably the two most consistently dominant goalies of the 21st century. It's not to say that he will turn out like those two, but it's hard to imagine a world where George actually doesn't end up as a quality starter in the NHL. Like these two titans of goaltending, George opts to play deeper in his crease on the majority of plays. This allows him to be on top of any play. He can look like he's just ridiculously quick, when in reality, he actually doesn't have to move much, and he just beats passes with ease. He's at his best when he's calm and composed, methodically reading and reacting to the play. While I try to objectively look solely at the World Juniors play in this series, it's hard to separate George from what I've seen from his play with Owen Sound in the OHL. There were times at the World Juniors where it seemed like George's structure would kind of break down. Nothing super concerning, but his stance could just break in broken plays, and if he excessively moved out of position, he could panic and flail a little bit. It was as if he was trying to play a little more athletically, something that, while he's not bad at certainly isn't his strength. This kind of loss of composure or inconsistency isn't something I've seen from him outside of this tournament, which is why I'm not concerned. Playing on a team like Canada with so much pressure on him, especially seeing as they severely underperform expectations, could definitely negatively affect a goalie. While there were some goals I know George would like to have back against the USA and Czechia, I still thought he played well, keeping Canada competitive while they provided little help. Unfortunately, he's no stranger to being let down by his team, as his club team in the OHL, Owen Sound, is awful. George is rather easily the best goalie in the OHL, but he doesn't put up MVP like numbers as he's been saddled with such a poor team. I think if he were playing the NCAA, he'd easily be one of the top goalies in the country, as he's very similar to Trey Augustine, who was one of the NCAA's best in his freshman year after being drafted the year prior. He projects to be a very good starter at the NHL level. George possesses the athleticism and speed that's good enough for the NHL, but it just doesn't really stand out. What will get him into the league and keep him there for a very long time are his technical skills. As for this tournament, I was impressed with George, but seeing as he only played 4 games and realistically could have played a bit better against Czechia or USA, I opted to rank him just below Michael Hrabal, but right above Trey Augustine. I believe the three of them are interchangeable, and I really had to nitpick to determine an order. I think everyone was surprised when Jack Ivankovic was named to Canada's selection camp, given that there were some more expected options, like already drafted Evan Gardner and Ryerson Leanders, or even fellow draft eligible Joshua Ravensbergen, who many believe to be the better of the pair. I bet even more were stunned to find out that he had beat out returner Scott Ratzlaff, not to mention ended up as the backup for Carter George, beating out 2 years older second round pick Carson Bjarnason. A 17-year-old goalie making Team Canada at the World Juniors is just unheard of, especially in a very strong year for Canadian goalies. Despite losing a soul crushing game to Latvia, Ivan Kovic did not disappoint in his performance. I found that he played very well, especially in the shootout, but was completely let down by the embarrassing offensive performance from his forwards. I won't spend too long speaking on Ivan Kovic, seeing as he only played a single game, and I have already made a much more detailed video for him that you can watch instead. However, I would still like to touch on the fact that Ivan Kovic is very quick and an athletic goalie. His speed is impressive, as it has to be, given his small stature of 5'11". What's most impressive about him is how he effectively tracks play by constantly and quickly adjusting his feet with small shuffles. He is aggressive and likes to attack shooters, especially in the shootout. His positioning is also quite good. I'm very impressed with how he can position himself despite being an overly athletic goalie. On the negative side, he does struggle a lot with rebound control, and he could fare to be a bit more consistent in his overall play. Regardless, he does have great potential for the NHL, very strong candidate for a second round pick this year, and he is a solid World Juniors showing, even just playing 1 game. Trey Augustine has returned as the ever rare 3 time World Junior starter for Team USA this year, and winning his second gold medal. Augustine was drafted 2 years ago in the early second round by the Detroit Red Wings, and ever since has been known as one of the premier goalie prospects, improving each year. He's played very well for Michigan State these past 2 seasons, and clearly he's been able to translate that same level of play to the world stage. It's hard for a gold medal winning goalie not to have a very impressive tournament because what else is there to do? His first game against Finland was his best, despite allowing 4 goals. He was thoroughly challenged throughout the whole game, and he played very well, giving his team a chance to win. Unfortunately, a weak left side goal in overtime did cost him the game. Outside of that, he was solid, but not being tested nearly to the same extent as his first game. Even in the gold medal game, Finland fell off a cliff after the first period and failed to do any real damage after their hot start. When it comes to skills, it doesn't really get much better than Augustine. Every major attribute you want in a goalie, Augustine has in abundance. Primarily, he's an extraordinary cerebral goalie. He's at his best when he's playing calm, reading the play, and anticipating it at the highest level, and positioning himself flawlessly. For a 19-year-old, it's almost unheard of with how smart he is. He's so keenly aware of the play unfolding, and it's constantly adjusting himself to be in the right position for any scenario. On top of that, he's actually an unbelievable skater too. His edge work and speed are top notch. He's able to zip around the crease with intensity and fluidity. His shuffles are very precise, and he sets his feet aside from a few outliers. His skating alone is good enough to propel him to the NHL, as it's, in my opinion, one of, if not the most important skill a goalie can have. If you didn't think that all of this was enough, he's also very athletic. But because he is so smart, he doesn't have to show his athleticism frequently. Yet, when he is forced to, he can be found showing elite agility and flexibility to reach out for impossible saves. There's only one real knock I have on Augustine, and it's how he plays in a high stance. Because he's 6'1" and is likely told that he's too small, it's been drilled into him that he has to make himself taller and conserve energy. This is a very misguided principle, though. When you play in a high stance, your first move you have to make is to set yourself while the shot is already on its way. It costs you time to react and make a controlled save, which is why it's very common that goalies get beaten cleanly when they're playing in a high stance. It's important to engage the shooter and be set for the shot. The energy you conserve from being relaxed does not make up for the reduced ability to make a save. It is something that I think could really hurt a goalie, yet we still see it being done by many in the NHL at present, so it shouldn't be something that is really detrimental to him in the long run. I think it's also something that can be easily correctable, but it's more dependent upon the goalie coach recognizing it and deciding to make an adjustment. We can see how it's a problem for Augustine from some of the goals he allowed in the tournament, especially in his lackluster performance against Germany. He got picked cleanly rather easily on various occasions and allowed some weaker glove side goals, or he just wasn't able to control the save. It's not ideal when your goalie allows in a weak one that either blows the game or even throughout the game because it can be demoralizing to the squad. Regardless, I think Augustine has incredible potential. In terms of raw skills, he's nearly perfect. He's quite easily the best goalie to have played at the tournament. He just didn't perform the best in this short frame. I elected to place him fifth, which, yes, does seem low for a goalie of his caliber. I do think he's very interchangeable with Michael Robel and Carter George. The problem is that none of the other two had truly bad games, whereas Augustine really did stink it up against the Germans. Combined with a relatively weaker workload, I feel it to be a pretty fair placement for him. Hampton Slukinski backed up Trey Augustine this season, despite being one of the best goalies in the tournament. Being somewhat under the radar, getting drafted out of high school in 2023, Slukinski's meteoric rise as a high end goalie prospect has been astounding. He's dominated the USHL, winning goalie of the year and the championship in his rookie season, and then became a top end NCAA starter, leading Western Michigan to its first ever national title. It truly is unfortunate he is in the same class as Augustine, as he would likely have dominated the World Juniors all the same. In his two games that he saw against Switzerland and Latvia, he did play well. It's easy to see how evident his talent is. Slukinski is very much like his Canadian counterpart Carter George in practically every way. He positions himself exceptionally well, controlling his depth so that he can see and react to the unfolding play. He's also a great skater, boasting powerful and precise shuffles with intelligent routes for efficient travel. He truly excels at being calm in all situations. Flustering Slukinski is nearly impossible. He's fantastic at holding his ground and won't overplay his hand. Like George, he isn't the most athletic goalie ever, but in all honesty, he's still probably slightly above average. It just is his weak spot. His only real issue is that he sometimes can play in a butterfly too often. I'd prefer to see him hold his feet more rather than butterflying in tight situations. But that's more of a stylistic issue rather than a lack of skill. Projects to be a very good NHL goalie, and especially with how his development has been going, I think he can reach that status relatively quickly and with a lot of certainty. I would have loved to see more of Slukinski at the World Juniors to see what he could have done, but regardless, he clearly is much more talented than the guys below him, and two well played games are enough for me to justify his ranking at 6.